I was still sitting on a cold metal bench at Miami International Airport when I realized my son wasn't coming back. Ethan had smiled when he took my suitcase and the envelope with all my documents. "Wait right here, Dad," he said. "I'll get the car." That was 3 hours ago. My phone buzzed once. Just one message. "You'll be better off where you belong." At 72, after a lifetime of raising him, that was how my son chose to leave me alone, confused and quietly erased. I don't know how long I would have sat there if a stranger hadn't decided I was worth noticing. And that decision changed everything. If you've ever felt forgotten by your own family, I want you to stay with me on this. Before we go further, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today, and what time is it there? And if this story speaks to you, even a little, consider liking and subscribing. It helps more people like us find stories that remind them they're not alone. 3 weeks before I found myself sitting alone in that airport, I truly believed my life was about to begin again. My name is Travis Worthington. I'm 72 years old, and until recently, I had lived in the same modest house in Cleveland, Ohio for nearly 40 years. It was the house my late wife Eleanor and I raised our son in. Every corner of it held something: her laughter in the kitchen, the faint scratch marks on the hallway wall, where Ethan measured his height year after year, the quiet evenings we spent pretending everything would always stay the same. After Eleanor passed 5 years ago, the house became quieter. Not empty exactly, just still, too still sometimes. So when Ethan called me out of the blue one evening, his voice unusually warm, I remember gripping the phone a little tighter. "Dad," he said, "you shouldn't be alone up there anymore." There was a pause, the kind that feels rehearsed. "I've been talking to Lindsay, and we think it's time you come down here. Florida's better for you. Warmer. Closer to family. Closer to family." That phrase stayed with me long after the call ended. My son hadn't visited in almost a year. Phone calls were short, usually rushed. My granddaughter Sophie used to talk to me more when she was younger, but lately, even she seemed distant. Teenagers grow up, I told myself. That's normal. Still, something about that call felt different. At first, I didn't question it. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had finally realized I needed him, or that he missed me the way I missed him. "I don't want to be a burden," I told him during our second call. "You're not a burden, Dad," Ethan replied quickly. Too quickly. "We've got everything figured out. Everything." That word should have made me pause longer than it did. Over the next few days, Ethan called more often than he had in years. He asked questions, detailed ones. "Do you still have the house deed in your name?" "Yes," I said. "Of course." Over the next few days, Ethan called more often than he had in years. He asked questions, detailed ones. "Do you still have the house deed in your name?" "Yes," I said. "Of course." "Good. Bring all that paperwork with you. It'll make things easier once you're here." Easier how I asked. "Well, in case we need to set things up. Healthcare, living arrangements, finances, just practical stuff." He said it casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then Lindsay started texting me, short, polite messages. "We're excited to have you here, Travis. Make sure you bring everything important so we can help organize it. Florida laws are different, so it's better if we handle things once you arrive." Handle things. I read that message at least 3 times. I told myself I was overthinking it. At my age, you learn to ignore small discomforts. You convince yourself that love doesn't always sound the way you expect it to. But then came the part that truly unsettled me. "Dad," Ethan said during another call, his tone shifting slightly. Have you thought about selling the house before you come down? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the framed photo of Eleanor on the mantel. Selling it, I repeated. Yeah, I mean, what's the point of keeping it if you're moving here permanently? You could use the money for something better. Or we could invest it for you. I was thinking I'd hold on to it for now, I said slowly, just in case. There was silence on the other end. Not long, but long enough. Well, he said finally, forcing a light laugh. We'll figure it out when you get here. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. The way he emphasized certain words. The way everything suddenly seemed to revolve around paperwork, money, and decisions that felt rushed. A few days later, my neighbor Howard Blake stopped by. Howard had lived next door for nearly as long as I had. Retired electrician. Widower like me. The kind of man who noticed things without making a show of it. You look like you've got something on your mind, he said as we sat on my porch. I told him about Ethan's invitation, about the move, about Florida. Howard nodded, listening carefully. That sounds nice, he said at first. Then he tilted his head slightly. But something about the way you're saying it tells me tells me you're not entirely convinced. I hesitated. Then I admitted it. He wants me to bring all my paperwork, I said. House deed, bank information, everything. Howard's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. Did he say why not entirely convinced? I hesitated. Then I admitted it. He wants me to bring all my paperwork, I said. House deed, bank information, everything. Howard's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. Did he say why? Just to make things easier? Howard let out a slow breath and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Travis, he said quietly, I'm not saying your son has bad intentions, but I've seen enough situations like this to know one thing. He looked me straight in the eye. Don't sign anything, not until you understand exactly what it is. I nodded, though a part of me resisted the idea. Ethan was my son. I had raised him. I had worked double shifts when he was young so he could go to college. I had co-signed his first car loan, helped him with the down payment on his house. People don't just turn on their parents like that, do they? I'm probably just being paranoid, I said, trying to brush it off. Howard didn't smile. Maybe he said, but being careful has never hurt anyone. After he left, I went inside and stood in the living room for a long time. I looked at everything, the worn couch, the old clock on the wall, the faint imprint of a life that had already passed, and I made a decision. I would go to Florida. But I wouldn't sell the house. Not yet. And I wouldn't sign anything. Not until I knew exactly what I was signing. So I gathered my documents, every important paper I had, and placed them carefully into a large manila envelope. House deed, insurance policies, bank account summaries, all of it. I told myself it was just precaution. I told myself everything would be fine. Looking back now, that envelope may have been the very thing my son wanted all along. And I carried it straight into his hands. If I'm being honest, the warning signs didn't start with that phone call. They had been there long before. Quiet, subtle things I chose not to see. After Eleanor passed, Ethan didn't come around much. At first, I told myself it was grief. People handle loss differently. Then I told myself it was work. He had a demanding job in Florida, a family to support, responsibilities I didn't fully understand anymore. But over time, something else crept in. Distance. Not just physical distance, but emotional. Conversations became shorter, less personal. When we did talk, it was usually about practical things, never about how I was really doing, never about how he was feeling, And then, about 6 months before that airport, something shifted. Ethan started asking questions. At first, they sounded harmless. "Hey, Dad, have you updated your will recently? Are your accounts still with the same bank? Do you have anyone helping you manage bills?" I remember laughing lightly the first time. "I've been managing my life just fine for 72 years, I told him. Yeah, he said. "I just want to make sure everything's organized. That word again. Then came Lindsay. My daughter-in-law had always been polite but distant. The kind of polite that felt practiced, not warm. She never said anything outright disrespectful, but there was always a tone subtle but unmistakable that suggested she saw me as outdated. A responsibility, not family. A few weeks before my flight, she called me directly. That alone was unusual. "Hi, Travis," she said, her voice smooth, controlled. "I just wanted to go over a few things before your trip." "Of course," I replied. "We've been looking into some options for you here in Florida," she continued. "You know, communities designed for seniors, places where everything is taken care of, meals, medical support activities." I frowned slightly, though she couldn't see me. "I thought I'd be staying with you and Ethan," I said. There was a pause, just a fraction too long. "Well," she said carefully, "we just want what's best for you. Independence, but also support." "I thought I'd be staying with you and Ethan," I said. There was a pause, just a fraction too long. "Well," she said carefully, "we just want what's best for you. Independence, but also support. Independence. Support." The words sounded nice, thoughtful even, but something about the way she said them made my chest tighten. "I'm still pretty independent," I said quietly. "Of course you are," she replied quickly. "This is just planning ahead. Planning ahead." That conversation stayed with me for days. I found myself walking through my house more slowly than usual, noticing things I hadn't paid attention to in years. The creak of the floor near the staircase. The way the afternoon light hit the dining table just right. The faint scent of Eleanor's perfume that still lingered in the bedroom closet. This wasn't just a house. It was my life. And suddenly, it felt like someone else was already deciding what would happen to it. A few days later, Ethan called again. "Dad, I booked your ticket," he said. "Next Friday, morning flight." "That soon?" I asked. "Yeah, it's better not to drag things out," he replied. "Once you're here, everything will fall into place." Everything. That word again. I hesitated. "Ethan," I said slowly, "I'm not selling the house yet." Silence. Not the kind of silence where someone is thinking, the kind where someone is adjusting. "Well," he said finally, his tone slightly sharper, "we can talk about it when you get here." "I'd rather decide that myself," I added. Another pause. "Of course," he said, but the warmth was gone now. "Whatever you want." After that, the calls became shorter again, colder. But by then, the flight was already booked. My ticket was printed, and I had convinced myself that whatever tension I was feeling would sort itself out once I arrived. Because that's what families do, right? They work things out. The night before I left, Howard came by again. He stood in my doorway, hands in his pockets, looking past me into the house. "You packed?" he asked. "Just about," I said. He nodded slowly, then his eyes landed on the manila envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. Everything he asked. "Important documents," I said. "Ethan said it would make things easier." Howard didn't move for a moment. Then he stepped inside and picked up the envelope, weighing it slightly in his hands. "You trust him?" he asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. "He's my son," I said. "That's not what I asked." I looked at him, unsure how to answer. Did I trust Ethan? Of course I did. Didn't I? I want to, I said, finally. Howard studied me for a long moment, then set the envelope back down. Just remember what I told you, he said. No signatures. No rushed decisions. I won't sign anything. I promised. But even as I said it, I felt a strange unease settle in my chest. Because deep down, I knew something had already been set in motion. The next morning, I locked the front door of my house and stood on the porch for a moment longer than necessary. The air was cool, familiar, safe. I told myself I'd be back soon, that this was just a visit. A new chapter maybe, but not an ending. I picked up my bag, tucked the envelope securely under my arm, and walked to the taxi waiting at the curb. As the car pulled away, I glanced back at the house. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I saw it as my home. Airports are strange places when you're alone. They're built for movement. People rushing past, rolling suitcases, clicking rhythmically across polished floors, announcements echoing overhead in calm, detached voices. Everything is designed to keep things flowing, except when you're the one who's been left behind. At first, I didn't panic. When Ethan said, "Wait here, Dad," I nodded and sat down on a metal bench near the pickup area. I placed my hands on my knees just like I used to when I was waiting for Eleanor outside grocery stores years ago. It felt familiar, comforting even. He had my suitcase, my envelope. But that made sense. He was going to the car after all. I checked my watch. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I glanced around, half expecting to see him weaving through the crowd with that quick, slightly impatient walk of his. But he didn't appear. 15 minutes. I told myself traffic at the pickup lane was probably backed up. Airports were always chaotic. 20 minutes. I shifted in my seat, adjusting my posture, trying not to look like someone who was waiting. 30 minutes. That's when the first small crack appeared. I pulled out my phone and dialed Ethan's number. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I frowned. "Hey, it's me," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Just checking in." "I'm still right where you left me." I hung up quickly, not wanting to sound worried. Another 10 minutes passed. Still nothing. I called again. This time, it didn't even ring. Straight to voicemail. That's when I felt it. That quiet, creeping sensation in your chest when something isn't just delayed, it's wrong. I stood up slowly, scanning the area. Families reunited, couples embracing, drivers holding signs with names on them. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. Except me. I walked toward the curb, peering out at the endless line of cars. Maybe I had misunderstood where he was picking me up. Maybe he was on the other side. I stepped closer, squinting in the Florida sun, searching for his car. Nothing. Just strangers. After a few minutes, I returned to the bench. This time, I didn't sit as comfortably. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, phone in my hands, staring at the screen, as if willing it to light up. 45 minutes. An hour. The crowd around me changed completely. New faces, new arrivals, new reunions. Time kept moving. Except for me. I tried calling again, straight to voicemail. "Come on, Ethan," I muttered under my breath. I wasn't angry yet, not even scared, just confused. This didn't make sense. My son wouldn't just leave me here. He wouldn't. Right, I checked my messages. Nothing new. Then just as I was about to call again, my phone buzzed. One message. From Ethan. I opened it immediately. "You'll be better off where you belong." I stared at the screen, reading it once, then again, and again. The words didn't change. They didn't soften. They didn't explain anything. They just sat there, cold, final. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe he sent it to the wrong person. Maybe it was meant for someone else. But deep down, I knew better. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The rushed phone calls, the insistence on bringing documents, the conversations about living arrangements, the way Lindsay had spoken about support and planning ahead. This had never been about bringing me closer to family. This had been about moving me out of the way, quietly, conveniently, permanently. My hands began to shake. I lowered the phone, slowly resting it on my thigh as I tried to steady my breathing. At 72 years old, I had lived through loss before. I had buried my wife. I had watched friends fade away. I had endured loneliness that most people couldn't imagine. But this was different. This wasn't loss. This was rejection. Deliberate, calculated. My own son had brought me here, taken everything important from me, and left me like luggage he no longer needed. I became aware of the people around me again. A young couple laughing nearby. A child running toward her mother. A man helping his elderly father into a car. I looked away quickly, because I couldn't bear to see it. That quiet, ordinary kindness. That simple, natural bond between parent and child. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not physical pain, something deeper, something heavier. I sat there for a long time staring at the ground. I didn't cry, not yet, because crying would mean accepting it, and I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I tried to think. What now? I had no luggage, no documents, very little cash, no clear place to go. I could try to get a flight back to Cleveland, but without my ID, without my information, even that felt impossible. For the first time in decades, I felt truly powerless, like I had stepped out of my own life and into someone else's nightmare. I must have looked exactly how I felt, because that's when I noticed him. He wasn't close. Standing off to the side near one of the support pillars. An older man, about my age, maybe a little younger. Straight posture, hands loosely at his sides, watching. Not staring, not intruding, just observing. At first I looked away. People glance at each other in airports all the time. It didn't mean anything, but when I looked up again, a few moments later, he was still there. And this time, I realized something. He wasn't just looking in my direction. He was watching me, carefully, like he had been for a while. I felt a flicker of discomfort. Then something else. Recognition. Not of him, but of the way he was looking at me. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't judgment. It was awareness, the kind you only see in people who have spent a lifetime noticing when something isn't right. I quickly looked down again, suddenly self-conscious. I didn't want pity. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to disappear. But a few seconds later, I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, approaching. I didn't look up immediately. I didn't want to encourage conversation. Not now. Not like this. But the footsteps stopped just a few feet in front of me, and then a calm, steady voice spoke. "Sir, how long have you been sitting here?" I closed my eyes briefly, because in that moment, I realized something had just changed. I didn't answer him right away, not because I didn't hear him, but because I didn't know how to explain what had just happened without it sounding unreal, even to me. So I kept my eyes on the floor for a moment longer, gathering what little dignity I still felt I had left. Long enough, I finally said. My voice sounded older than I remembered. The man didn't sit down immediately. He waited as if giving me the chance to dismiss him. When I didn't, he lowered himself onto the bench beside me, but not too close. Close enough to talk. Far enough to respect my space. "I'm Daniel Mercer," he said calmly. "Retired Air Force." I nodded slightly, still not looking directly at him. "Travis Worthington." There was a brief silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that allows something real to settle. Daniel didn't rush, didn't pry, didn't offer empty sympathy. Instead, he asked a simple question. "Are you waiting for someone? Or were you left here?" That word, left. It hit harder than anything Ethan had said. I let out a slow breath, then looked at him for the first time. His face was lined with age, but steady, focused, the kind of face that had seen enough of the world to recognize when something wasn't right. "I think," I said carefully. "I was left." Daniel studied me for a moment, then nodded, like he had already suspected as much. "Do you have a ticket out?" he asked. "No." "Identification." I hesitated. "My son has it." That was the moment something changed in his expression. Not shock, not pity, recognition. "Did he take your luggage too?" he asked. "Yes. And your documents?" I swallowed. "Yes." Daniel leaned back slightly, his jaw tightening just enough for me to notice. "How long ago did he leave?" he asked. "About 3 hours," I said. "And he hasn't answered your calls." I shook my head. He sent one message. Daniel didn't speak. He just waited. So I showed him. I handed him my phone, the message still open on the screen. "You'll be better off where you belong." He read it once, then handed the phone back to me without comment. But I saw it in his eyes. Not surprise, not confusion, something worse. Certainty. "I've seen this before," he said quietly. The words made my stomach drop. "Seen what?" I asked. He turned slightly toward me, lowering his voice just enough that it wouldn't carry. "Situations where elderly parents are brought somewhere unfamiliar, separated from their belongings, and then abandoned." I stared at him. "That's not—" I started instinctively, but I couldn't finish the sentence. Because deep down, I knew he wasn't wrong. Daniel didn't push. He just continued calmly. "Sometimes it's about control," he said. "Sometimes it's about money. Sometimes both." I felt a slow, cold realization begin to settle in my chest. He took my documents. I said more to myself than to him. "All of them." Daniel nodded. "House deed, yes. Bank information, yes. Any kind of power of attorney paperwork?" My head snapped toward him. "There was a form," I said slowly. "He asked me to bring it. I hadn't signed it yet." Daniel exhaled quietly. "That's good," he said. "Very good. Why I asked?" He looked at me directly now. "Because if you had signed it, you might not have anything left to protect." The words landed like a weight on my chest. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All I could think about was that envelope, how carefully I had packed it, how willingly I had handed it over. Like I was helping him, like I was doing what a father was supposed to do. I didn't think I said weakly, "Of course you didn't." Daniel replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "You trusted your son." That word, trusted, felt like something fragile breaking inside me. I looked away again, blinking slowly. "I don't understand," I said. "Why would he do this, Daniel didn't answer right away. Because there wasn't a simple answer. There are people, he said eventually, who see opportunity where others see responsibility. I let that sink in, and for the first time since I arrived at the airport, I felt something shift inside me. Not just pain, not just confusion, awareness. Because this wasn't just abandonment. This was a plan. A deliberate one. What do I do now? I asked quietly. It was the first time I had asked anyone that question in years. Daniel didn't hesitate. First he said, "You don't leave this airport alone." I looked at him surprised. "I wasn't planning to," I began. "You might," he said. "People in your position often do. They feel embarrassed. They try to disappear quietly." He wasn't wrong. That was exactly what I had been thinking just minutes earlier. Second, he continued, "We figure out exactly what your son has done and what he's trying to do next." How, I asked. Daniel glanced toward the security area across the terminal. "I still know a few people here," he said. "Airport security. Retired doesn't mean forgotten." There was a quiet confidence in his voice that I hadn't heard in anyone in a long time. It wasn't arrogance. It was experience. Would they even help, I asked. "If I ask," he said simply. I studied him for a moment. This man didn't know me, didn't owe me anything. And yet he was sitting here offering help as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Why, I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Daniel looked at me, not offended, but thoughtful. "Because someone should have helped my sister," he said. I frowned slightly. "What happened?" He looked away briefly, then back at me. "She trusted the wrong person," he said. And by the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. There was something in his voice now. Not anger, not bitterness, now. Not anger, not bitterness. Something quieter. Regret. "I couldn't change what happened to her," he added. "But I can make sure it doesn't happen again if I'm standing close enough to see it." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. And for the first time since that message appeared on my phone, I didn't feel completely alone. Daniel stood up slowly, straightening his jacket. "Stay right here," he said. "I'm going to make a call." I watched as he walked toward the security office, his steps steady, purposeful. Not rushed, not uncertain, like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. I looked down at my hands again. They weren't shaking anymore, because something had changed. I wasn't just the man who had been left behind at an airport. Not anymore. Now someone had seen me, and that was enough to change everything. Daniel didn't take long, maybe 10 minutes, but in that time, everything inside me had already begun to shift. The helplessness I had felt earlier was still there, but now it had something else mixed in with it. Focus. When Daniel returned, he wasn't alone. A uniformed airport security officer walked beside him, a woman in her 40s, composed and attentive. Her name tag read, Officer Ramirez. "Mr. Worthington," she said gently. I stood up instinctively, even though my knees felt heavier than usual. "Yes." Daniel gave her a brief nod. "This is the gentleman I mentioned," he said. "Possible financial exploitation case?" The words sounded clinical, almost detached, but they hit me hard. Financial exploitation. Was that what this was? Officer Ramirez studied me carefully, not with suspicion, but with concern that felt practiced. "I'm sorry you're going through this," she said. "Let's see what we can figure out." I nodded, unsure what to say. She gestured toward a quieter area near the security office. Why don't we step over here and talk? I followed them, my steps slow but steady. Every movement felt heavier now, not just physically, but emotionally. Like I was walking deeper into something I didn't fully understand yet. Inside the small office, the noise of the airport faded. No announcements, no rushing footsteps, just silence. Officer Ramirez motioned for me to sit. Start from the beginning, she said. So I did. I told her everything. The phone call from Ethan, the sudden invitation, the pressure to bring documents, the conversation with Lindsay, the envelope, the airport, the waiting, the message. She didn't interrupt, didn't question, just listened occasionally, jotting down notes. When I finished, she leaned back slightly, exchanging a glance with Daniel. Okay, she said. Let's go step by step. She turned back to me. You said your son took your luggage and documents? Did he say where he was going? He said he was getting the car, I replied. And then he disappeared. Yes. She nodded. Do you know the make or model of his car? I frowned slightly, trying to remember. A dark SUV, I said. Maybe a Ford or something similar. That helps, she said, writing it down. Then she looked up again. Mr. Worthington, I'd like to check the airport cameras, see exactly what happened after he left you. Would that be all right? I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to see it, didn't want confirmation. But another part of me, the part that had started to wake up when Daniel spoke, knew I needed the truth. Yes, I said quietly. Please. Officer Ramirez nodded and stood up. I'll be right back. As she stepped out, I was left alone with Daniel again. The silence between us felt different now. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was something else, a witness, a steady presence in the middle of something unstable. You're doing the right thing, he said. I don't feel like I am, I admitted. He gave a small, understanding nod. That's because you're still thinking like a father, he said. Not like someone who's been wronged. I looked at him. What's the difference? He leaned back slightly. A father looks for reasons to forgive, he said. A victim has to look for the truth first. That stayed with me, because for the past few hours, I had been doing exactly that. Trying to find excuses, trying to explain Ethan's behavior in a way that didn't hurt as much. Traffic, a misunderstanding, a mistake. But the message on my phone didn't leave much room for interpretation. You'll be better off where you belong. That wasn't confusion, that was intention. The door opened again. Officer Ramirez stepped back in her expression, more serious now. Mr. Worthington, she said we found your son on the cameras. My heart skipped. Where is he? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she gestured toward a monitor mounted on the wall. Come take a look. I stood up slowly and walked over. The screen flickered to life, black and white footage, timestamp in the corner. There I was, sitting on the bench. Ethan standing in front of me, holding my suitcase. I watched myself nod as he spoke. Then he turned and walked away. So far exactly as I remembered. But then the camera angle changed. Another corridor. Another view. Ethan walked quickly now, purposeful. Not heading toward the parking lot. Not toward the exit. Toward another section of the terminal. I felt my chest tighten. That's not the way to the parking garage, I said quietly. No, Officer Ramirez confirmed. We watched as Ethan stopped near a side entrance, and then someone approached him. Lindsay, my daughter-in-law. She took the suitcase from him, then the envelope. I felt something inside me drop. Not break, not shatter, just fall. Because this wasn't a moment of bad judgment. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was coordination, planning, execution. They came separately, Daniel said quietly beside me. Officer Ramirez nodded. Looks like they didn't want to be seen arriving together. On the screen, Lindsay checked something inside the envelope. Then she nodded, and without hesitation, she turned and walked away. Ethan didn't follow her. He stood there for a moment, then pulled out his phone, probably sending that message. You'll be better off where you belong. I closed my eyes briefly, because seeing it was worse than imagining it. They didn't even look back, I said. No one responded, because there was nothing to say. The footage ended. The screen went dark. I stood there for a moment longer staring at my own reflection in the black glass. A man who had spent his entire life believing that family meant something unbreakable, and now forced to see that belief for what it really was. Hope, not certainty. Mr. Worthington, Officer Ramirez said gently, "There's more." I turned slowly. "What else?" I asked. She hesitated for just a second. "After your daughter-in-law left the terminal, she made a phone call." My stomach tightened again. To who? I asked. Officer Ramirez looked down at her notes. "A local care facility," she said. The words landed heavily. Care facility. Not home. Not family. Not welcome. A place to be stored. Managed. Removed. They were arranging something, she added. We're still pulling the details. I let out a slow breath. And for the first time since this began, I felt something rise up inside me. Not confusion, not sadness. Something sharper. Anger. Quiet. Controlled. But real. Because now I understood. This wasn't just about leaving me behind. This was about taking everything I had and deciding where I belonged. Without ever asking me. I turned to Daniel. "What's next?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Now," he said, "we stop them." And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't powerless anymore. We didn't leave the airport that day, not right away. Instead, everything shifted into motion faster than I expected, like a machine that had been waiting for someone to press the right button. And somehow, that button had been pressed the moment Daniel decided I wasn't invisible. Officer Ramirez made a few calls from her desk, her voice calm but direct. I could hear just enough to understand that this was no longer being treated as a simple family misunderstanding. Words like fraud, unauthorized access, and elder exploitation floated through the air. Each one landed differently. Each one made what had happened feel more real and more serious. "Mr. Worthington," she said after ending one of the calls, "we've alerted local authorities and flagged your son's name. If he attempts to use any of your documents within the area, it will raise attention." I nodded slowly. "That's good," I said, though my voice felt distant, because part of me was still stuck on something else. The image of Ethan handing over my life, my documents, my security to Lindsay without hesitation. No doubt, no guilt, just efficiency. Daniel seemed to notice where my thoughts were going. "Don't stay in that moment too long," he said quietly. "It'll pull you under." I looked at him. "How do you not?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "Because once you understand what they did," he said, "the only thing that matters is what you do next." That grounded me, pulled me forward, because he was right. What Ethan had done was already done, but what came next, that was still mine to control. A few minutes later, Officer Ramirez returned with a folder in her hand. "We were able to pull more footage," she said, "and we found something else you need to see." My stomach tightened again, but this time I didn't hesitate. "I want to see it," I said. She nodded and led us back to the monitor. The footage started again, this time from outside the terminal, a different camera angle. We watched as Lindsay exited the building, walking quickly toward the pickup lane. Moments later, a car pulled up. Dark sedan, not Ethan's SUV. She opened the back door, got in, and disappeared from view. "Can you zoom in?" Daniel asked. Officer Ramirez adjusted the image. The license plate came into focus. She wrote it down. "We're running that now," she said. Then she paused. "There's more." The footage cut again. This time, it showed Lindsay sitting in the back seat, phone pressed to her ear. No audio, but her lips were moving. Focused. Intent. She made that call immediately after leaving. Officer Ramirez said, "We were able to confirm the number." "To the care facility?" I asked. "Yes." I felt that same cold weight settle in my chest again. "But that's not all," she added. She clicked forward a few seconds. Lindsay nodded while speaking. Then she said something that made my breath catch even without sound, because I could read her lips. Clear as day. He's there. Alone. I stepped back slightly, as if distance could somehow soften what I had just seen. But it didn't, because now there was no doubt left, no confusion, no misunderstanding. This had been planned down to the minute. "She was confirming your location," Daniel said quietly, making sure the next step could happen. What next step, I asked, though. I already had a feeling. Officer Ramirez answered. "The facility told us they were expecting a drop-off later today," she said. My chest tightened. "A drop-off," I repeated. "Yes," she said gently. "They believed your son would be bringing you in." That word again. Bringing. As if I were something to be delivered, processed, filed away. I ran a hand over my face, trying to steady myself. "They were just going to take me there?" I asked. "Likely," Daniel said. "And once you were inside, it would have been much harder to leave, especially without your documents." I closed my eyes for a moment, and suddenly, everything connected. The urgency, the pressure, the coordination, the separation. They weren't just trying to take my assets. They were trying to remove me from the equation entirely. "Why not just ask?" I said quietly. "Why not just tell me what they wanted?" Daniel looked at me, his expression steady. "Because you might have said no." That was it. That simple. That final. I let out a slow breath. And this time, when I opened my eyes, something inside me had changed. The confusion was gone. The hesitation was gone. Even the lingering hope that this could somehow be explained away, gone. In its place was something else. Clarity. "They're not getting away with this," I said. My voice didn't shake. Daniel gave a small nod. "No," he said, "they're not." Officer Ramirez stepped forward slightly. "We're going to continue gathering evidence," she said. "But in the meantime, there are a few immediate steps we need to take." I turned to her. "What do I need to do?" "First," she said, "we need to secure your identity. Without your ID, things are more complicated, but not impossible." She pulled out a form and placed it on the desk. We'll help you file a temporary identification request. It won't replace everything, but it will give you a NOAH to move forward. I nodded. Okay. She pulled out a form and placed it on the desk. We'll help you file a temporary identification request. It won't replace everything, but it will give you enough to move forward. I nodded. Okay. Second, she continued, we strongly recommend contacting your bank immediately. If your son has access to your account information, there's a risk he may attempt transactions. I'll call them, I said. And third, she added, you should not attempt to confront your son directly. Not yet, I paused. Why not? Because right now, she said, he doesn't know that you know. That made sense, and more importantly, it gave us an advantage. Daniel crossed his arms slightly. We keep him comfortable, he said. Let him think his plan is working. And then I asked. Daniel looked at me. Then we take everything back. There was something in his voice when he said that. Not anger, not revenge, something more controlled, more precise. Justice. I nodded slowly, because for the first time since I sat down on that bench, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing, and somewhere out there, Ethan and Lindsay still believed they had already won. They had no idea the story was just beginning. The next hour moved faster than the rest of the day combined, not because time had changed, but because I had. For the first time since stepping off that plane, I wasn't reacting to what had happened to me. I was preparing for what I was going to do about it. Officer Ramirez set me up at a desk with a phone. Call your bank first, she said. Use speaker if you're comfortable. We'll walk through this together. My fingers hovered over the keypad for a moment. This was something I had done hundreds of times before, calling about routine matters, checking balances, confirming transactions. But this time felt different. This time I wasn't calling as a customer. I was calling as someone trying to protect what was left of his life. I dialed the number. After a few rings, a calm voice answered. Thank you for calling First National Bank. How can I assist you today? I took a breath. My name is Travis Worthington, I said. I believe my account may be at risk. There was a pause, brief professional. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Worthington. Let me verify your identity first. I hesitated. I don't have my ID with me, I said. It was taken. Officer Ramirez stepped closer, nodding slightly. Tell them it's a security situation, she whispered. It's a security situation, I added. The tone on the other end shifted immediately. Understood, sir. We'll proceed with alternative verification. Please answer a few questions. They ask things only I would know. Old addresses, transaction history, account details. It took a few minutes, but eventually the representative said the words I needed to hear. Thank you, Mr. Worthington. Your identity has been confirmed. How can I assist you further? I swallowed. I need to freeze my accounts, I said. Immediately. There was no hesitation this time. Of course, sir. One moment. I glanced at Daniel. He gave a small nod. You're doing exactly what you need to do, he said quietly. I waited, listening to the faint clicking of a keyboard on the other end. Then, Mr. Worthington, the representative said, her voice now more serious. There have been recent access attempts on your account. My heart dropped. What kind of attempts? I asked. Online login attempts from a device not previously associated with your account, she said, and a pending request to add an authorized user. I closed my eyes briefly. Authorized user, Ethan or Lindsay. They didn't succeed, she added quickly. The system flagged it due to unusual activity. We were waiting for confirmation. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Cancel it, I said firmly, and freeze everything. Yes, sir. Your accounts are now secured. No transactions will be processed without direct verification from you. Thank you, I said quietly. When the call ended, I set the phone down slowly. They already tried, I said. Daniel nodded. Of course they did, he replied. That was always the next step. Officer Ramirez leaned against the desk. You stopped it in time, she said. That matters. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about how close it had come, how easily things could have gone differently. If Daniel hadn't noticed me, if I had left the airport quietly, if I had given up. Everything I had built over a lifetime could have disappeared in a matter of hours. Okay, Officer Ramirez said, straightening slightly. Next step. I looked at her. What now? We find them, she said. Simple. Direct. Final. How I asked. She held up the paper with the license plate number. We already ran the plate, she said. The vehicle is registered to a private transportation company. That doesn't tell us much, I said. It tells us enough, she replied. We contacted the company. They confirmed the pickup. My chest tightened again. And they have a destination, she said. I leaned forward slightly. Where? She hesitated just long enough to prepare me. Sunridge Assisted Living Center, she said. The name meant nothing to me, but the implication meant everything. That is where they were taking me, I said. Yes, she confirmed. I sat back slowly. It felt strange hearing it spoken out loud, like something that had been hidden was now fully exposed. They already arranged it, I said. Likely in advance, Daniel added. I nodded. Of course they had. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't emotional. This was structured, planned, controlled. Are they there now? I asked. Officer Ramirez shook her head. We don't know yet, but we do know this. The facility was expecting someone to bring you in later today. So they're waiting, I said. Yes. I exchanged a glance with Daniel, and in that moment, something clicked. They don't know I'm not coming, I said. Daniel's expression shifted slightly. Exactly, he said. They think everything is going according to plan, I continued. And that, Daniel said, is where we have the advantage. I felt it then. For the first time since this started, I wasn't behind anymore. I was ahead. They're going to show up, I said slowly, at some point. Or they'll call to confirm, Officer Ramirez added. Either way, Daniel said they're expecting a result. I nodded. And we're going to give them one, I said. Both of them looked at me. Just not the one they planned, I added. A small, almost imperceptible smile crossed Daniel's face. Now you're thinking clearly, he said. Officer Ramirez checked her watch. We can coordinate with local law enforcement near the facility, she said. Set something up. Like what? I asked. A controlled confrontation, she said. With documentation, evidence, witnesses. I let that settle in. A confrontation. Not emotional, not chaotic, structured, like everything they had tried to do to me. Only this time, it would be on my terms. Will I need to be there? I asked. She nodded. Yes, but you won't be alone. I glanced at Daniel. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because I already knew. He wasn't going anywhere, all right, I said. My voice was steady now, clear. We do it. Officer Ramirez nodded. I'll make the arrangements. As she stepped away, Daniel turned to me. You ready for this? He asked. I thought about it. About Ethan. About everything he had done. About everything he had tried to take. And about the man I had been just a few hours ago, sitting quietly on a bench, waiting for someone who was never coming back. I am now, I said. because I wasn't that man anymore. And somewhere out there, Ethan and Lindsay were still moving forward with their plan, still believing they were in control, still thinking I was exactly where they left me. Alone, confused, defeated. They had no idea I was already on my way to meet them. We left the airport just before sunset. Not in a rush, not in panic. Everything was deliberate now. Officer Ramirez had coordinated with local law enforcement near the facility, and while she couldn't leave her post, she made sure we had everything we needed: contacts, documentation, and a clear plan. Daniel insisted on driving. "I know this area better than you do," he said simply. I didn't argue. As we walked toward the parking structure, I noticed something I hadn't felt all day. Air. Real air. Not the recycled artificial kind inside the terminal, but warm Florida air brushing against my face. For a brief moment, I closed my eyes. Just 1 second. Because earlier that day, I had stepped into this state believing I was coming home to family. Now I was walking towards something else entirely. The truth. Daniel's car was parked in a quiet corner of the garage. A dark blue sedan, clean, but unremarkable. Practical. Like him. As we drove out, the sky was beginning to shift, orange fading into deep blue, the kind of sunset that usually makes people pause. But neither of us spoke about it. The silence in the car wasn't empty. It was focused. "How far is it?" I asked after a few minutes. "About 30 minutes, Daniel replied. "Traffic's light." I nodded, watching the road ahead. Palm trees lined the streets, low buildings, bright signs advertising things I had no interest in. It all felt unfamiliar, disconnected, like I had been dropped into someone else's life. "Tell me something," I said after a while. Daniel glanced at me briefly. "What is it?" "What happens if they don't show up?" I asked. He considered that for a moment. "They will," he said. "How do you know?" "Because people like that don't leave things unfinished," he replied, "especially when money is involved." I let that sink in. It made sense. Ethan hadn't gone through all of this just to walk away. He had a plan, and that plan wasn't complete yet. "They'll come to confirm," Daniel continued, "or to finalize whatever arrangement they made." "And when they do?" I asked. Daniel's hands remained steady on the wheel. "We'll be ready." That was all he said, but it was enough. We drove the rest of the way in silence, not uncomfortable, just intentional. When we finally turned into the entrance of Sunridge Assisted Living Center, I felt something tighten in my chest again. Not fear. Not exactly. Something closer to recognition. Because this place, this was where my son had decided I belonged. The building itself was clean, well-maintained, soft lighting, carefully trimmed hedges. From the outside, it looked peaceful, respectable, the kind of place people would describe as nice. But as we pulled into the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a home. It was a destination chosen for me, without my consent. Daniel parked the car, but didn't turn off the engine right away. "You okay?" he asked. I looked at the building, at the entrance, at the doors I was supposed to walk through without knowing why. "I'm not the man they think I am," I said quietly. Daniel gave a small nod. "No," he said. "You're not." I took a breath. "Let's do this." We stepped out of the car together. The air had cooled slightly, but the tension in my chest hadn't. As we approached the entrance, I noticed a police cruiser parked discreetly along the side of the building. Not obvious, not flashing lights, just present, waiting. Officer Ramirez had done exactly what she promised. We weren't alone. Inside the lobby was quiet. A soft, instrumental melody played in the background. A receptionist sat behind a polished desk, smiling politely as we entered. Desk smiling politely as we entered. "Good evening," she said. "How can I help you?" Daniel stepped forward before I could speak. "We're here regarding a scheduled intake," he said calmly. "Name, Travis Worthington." "Good evening," she said. "How can I help you?" Daniel stepped forward before I could speak. "We're here regarding a scheduled intake," he said calmly. "Name, Travis Worthington." The receptionist's expression shifted slightly, subtle but noticeable. "One moment," she said, turning to her computer. I stood there, hands at my sides, feeling something strange. I was standing in a place that had already prepared for me, a place that had expected me. And yet I had never agreed to be here. "Yes," the receptionist said after a moment. "We do have an intake scheduled for Mr. Worthington this evening." She looked up at me, her smile returning. "Welcome. We've been expecting you." The words felt surreal. I glanced at Daniel. He gave me a slight nod, "Stay calm." "I wasn't aware of that," I said carefully. The receptionist blinked just briefly. "Oh," she said. "Your son called earlier to confirm." "Of course he did. Is he here?" I asked. "Not yet," she replied, "but he said he would be arriving shortly." I felt my pulse slow. Not speed up, slow, because this was it. "They're coming," I said quietly to Daniel. He nodded once. "I told you." The receptionist stood. "If you'd like, I can take you to the waiting area," she said. "Well, begin the intake process once your son arrives." I almost laughed at that. The intake process. As if I were checking into a hotel or signing up for something voluntary. "Thank you," I said. "We'll wait." She led us to a seating area off to the side. Soft chairs, warm lighting, a table with neatly arranged brochures about comfortable senior living and peace of mind for families. I picked one up absent-mindedly. The words blurred together. Because I wasn't here for any of that. I was here for something else. Minutes passed, each one stretching just enough to remind me what was coming. Then, the front door opened. I didn't need to look. I knew. There are moments in life when your body recognizes something before your mind does. This was one of them. I slowly turned my head. And there he was, Ethan, standing in the doorway scanning the room. Behind him, Lindsay, perfectly composed as always. For a brief second, neither of them noticed me. They were focused on the receptionist, on the process, on finishing what they had started. Then Ethan turned, and his eyes met mine. Everything froze. His expression didn't shift immediately because his mind hadn't caught up yet. But then, recognition, shock, something else, something I hadn't seen in him in a very long time, uncertainty. "Dad," he said. Just one word, like nothing had happened, like everything was normal. I stood up slowly, not rushed, not emotional, just steady. "Hello, Ethan," I said. My voice didn't shake, didn't crack, because in that moment, I wasn't the man he left at the airport. And for the first time since this began, he knew it. For a moment, no one moved. Ethan stood frozen near the entrance, his hand still halfway raised, as if he had been about to greet someone else, someone who wasn't supposed to be me. Lindsay beside him didn't speak, But I saw it. The shift in her posture, the tightening in her jaw. She understood faster than he did. This wasn't part of the plan. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Ethan asked again, his voice lower now, uncertain. I held his gaze. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied calmly. Silence. The receptionist glanced between us, sensing something was off, but not yet understanding what. Daniel stepped slightly to my side, not in front of me, not shielding me, just present, grounded. Ethan's eyes flicked briefly toward him. "Who is this?" he asked, a hint of irritation slipping into his tone. "A man who didn't leave me behind," I said. That landed. I saw it. The first crack. Ethan's expression faltered just for a second. "I didn't," he started. But then Lindsay stepped forward, smooth, controlled, reclaiming the moment. "Travis," she said, her voice soft but deliberate, "there must be some misunderstanding." I almost smiled, because there it was, the same tone she had used on the phone, polished, measured, designed to reshape reality. "I agree," I said. "There is a misunderstanding." She relaxed slightly as if expecting me to continue in her direction. "I misunderstood who my family was," I added. That wiped the composure right off her face. Not completely. But enough. Ethan took a step forward. "Dad, listen," he said. "No," I interrupted, my voice still calm. "You listen." That stopped him, because I had never spoken to him like that before, not once in his life. "You brought me here under false pretenses," I continued. "You took my documents, my belongings, and then you left me sitting at an airport like I didn't matter." His face flushed. "It's not like that," he said quickly. "Then explain it," I replied. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Lindsay. That was all I needed to see, because he didn't have his own explanation. He was waiting for hers. And Lindsay hesitated, just for a moment, because now she understood something important. This wasn't a private conversation anymore. And right on cue, "Mr. Worthington?" We all turned. A uniformed police officer stepped into the lobby, followed by another just behind him. Calm, professional, but unmistakably present. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice sharpening. Officer Daniels, his badge red, looked directly at him. "Sir Wed like to ask you a few questions," he said, "about what Ethan demanded, about the removal of personal documents belonging to Mr. Travis Worthington," the officer replied. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Lindsay stepped forward again. "There's no need for this," she said smoothly. "This is a family matter." Officer Daniels didn't even look at her. "It became more than that when financial exploitation was suspected," he said. "That word again. Exploitation. This time it didn't feel distant. It felt accurate." Ethan turned to me, panic beginning to surface beneath his frustration. "Dad, you called the police?" he said. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "Someone helped me." His eyes flicked again toward Daniel, and this time there was something different in them. Not just irritation. Fear. "What did you tell them?" Ethan asked. "The truth," I said. "That's not," he started, but Officer Daniels raised a hand slightly. "Sir, we're going to need you to step outside with us," he said. Ethan hesitated, then looked at Lindsay. She gave him a small nod. Controlled, measured, but I could see it now. The calculation behind her eyes. They were adjusting again, trying to pivot, trying to regain control. "We haven't done anything wrong," Ethan said, his voice more defensive now. "That's something well determined," the officer replied. They guided him toward the entrance, not forcefully, but firmly. Lindsay remained inside. Of course she did. She always chose her position carefully. As soon as the door closed behind them, she turned back to me. And for the first time, her mask dropped. Not completely, but enough. "You've made this very complicated," she said quietly. I met her gaze. "No," I replied. "You did." She exhaled slowly, then adjusted her posture again, back to composed. "Travis," she said, "this was for your benefit." I almost laughed. "Leaving me at an airport without identification was for my benefit," I asked. "You weren't supposed to stay there," she said quickly. "Ethan was coming back." "With what?" I cut in. "Excuses." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You don't understand the situation," she said. "Then explain it," I replied. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything, because there was no version of this that sounded right when spoken out loud. "We were trying to help you transition," she said finally. "You can't live alone forever." "That's my decision," I said. "You're not thinking clearly," she replied. There it was. The shift. From polite manipulation to quiet dismissal. "You mean I'm not thinking the way you want me to?" I said. She didn't answer, because that was exactly what she meant. I took a step closer, not aggressively, just enough to make it clear I wasn't stepping back anymore. "You arranged this place," I said, "without asking me." "It's a good facility," she replied. "That's not the point. You would have been taken care of," she insisted. "I take care of myself," I said firmly. Her composure slipped again. "Just a fraction. Not forever," she said. There was something in her tone now. Something colder, less polished, more honest. And in that moment, I understood. This had never been about my well-being. It had been about control, about convenience, about removing the one variable they couldn't predict. Me. The door opened again. Ethan stepped back inside, his face pale. The officers remained just behind him. "They're asking about the accounts," he said, looking at Lindsay now. She froze, just for a second. "What accounts?" she asked. "The ones you tried to access," he said. And there it was, the final piece, exposed, out loud, in front of everyone. Lindsay didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. I looked at both of them. My son, and the woman who had helped him become someone I no longer recognized. And I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I expected, because anger requires energy, and what I felt now was clarity. "You should go," I said quietly. Ethan looked at me confused. "Dad." "You should go," I repeated, "and whatever happens next, you'll face it without me." That hit him harder than anything else, because for the first time in his life, I wasn't standing behind him. I was standing apart from him. And there was no way back to where we had been. Not anymore, de. The lobby didn't return to normal after that. It couldn't. Something had shifted quietly, permanently. The receptionist had stopped pretending this was a routine intake. She stayed behind her desk now, watching carefully, her polite smile gone, replaced by something more cautious. Ethan stood in the middle of the room like someone who had just realized he was no longer in control of the story. And Lindsay? She was recalculating. I could see it in the way her eyes moved, not panicked, not frantic. Strategic. Always strategic. Officer Daniels stepped forward again, his tone steady. "Ma'am," he said to Lindsay, "we'll need to speak with you as well." She didn't argue, not immediately. Instead, she adjusted her posture, smoothing her jacket, as if preparing for a meeting rather than an investigation. "Of course," she said calmly, "but I think there's been a misunderstanding," the same line, again. But this time, it didn't carry the same weight, because now there were witnesses, there was evidence, and most importantly, there was me. "No," I said quietly, stepping forward before the officer could respond. "There hasn't been." Lindsay turned to me, her expression tightening just slightly. "This doesn't have to escalate," she said. "It already did," I replied. Silence. Heavy. Final. Officer Daniels gestured toward a side room. "Let's continue this conversation privately," he said. Ethan looked at me one more time before following. There was something in his eyes now I hadn't seen before. Not just fear. Not just confusion. Loss. Because for the first time, he understood that something had broken between us, and it wasn't going to be repaired with excuses. The door closed behind them, and just like that, the room felt different again, quieter, but not peaceful. I remained standing for a moment, staring at the door. Then I felt a hand lightly touch my shoulder. "Daniel, you held your ground," he said. I nodded slowly. "I didn't have a choice," I replied. He gave a small, thoughtful nod. "There's always a choice," he said. "You just made the right one." I wasn't sure if it felt right yet, but it felt necessary. We moved back toward the seating area, but I didn't sit down right away. My eyes drifted around the room again. The brochures, the soft chairs, the carefully designed calm. And I realized something unsettling. This place wasn't the problem. It was what it represented. A decision made without me. A life redirected without my consent. "You know," I said quietly, "there's nothing wrong with a place like this." Daniel glanced at me. "No," he said. "There isn't. It's how I got here," I added. He nodded. "That's the difference." I finally sat down, leaning back slightly. For the first time in hours, my body felt the weight of everything that had happened. Not just physically, emotionally. Because now that the confrontation had happened, there was space. Space to think, to feel, to process. "What happens next?" I asked. Daniel sat across from me, resting his hands on his knees. "Now," he said. "Now the system does its part." I frowned slightly. "And what does that look like?" "It means questions," he said. "Statements, reports, possibly charges." I let that sink in. Charges. Against my own son. The word felt heavy, complicated. "Do you want that?" Daniel asked. The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. "I don't know," I admitted. He nodded. "That's honest," he said. I looked down at my hands. "They're still my family," I said. "Yes," he replied. "But they tried to take everything from me," I added. "Yes," he said again. The two truths sat there, side by side, neither canceling the other out. And that was the hardest part, because this wasn't simple. It wasn't just right or wrong. It was personal, deeply personal. I spent my whole life building something I said quietly. A home, stability, a future for him. Daniel didn't interrupt, and he saw it as something to take. I continued. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the abandonment, not the deception, the intention behind it. "I don't think he started out this way," I said. "Most people don't," Daniel replied. "So what changed?" I asked. Daniel leaned back slightly, thinking. "Sometimes," he said, People don't change. They just reveal themselves when the stakes get higher. I considered that, because it made sense. There had been signs, small ones, moments I had ignored, excused, minimized, because that's what you do when you love someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt, even when they haven't earned it. The door opened again. Both of us looked up. Officer Daniels stepped back into the lobby. Alone. For a moment, I thought something had gone wrong. But then he approached us calmly. "Mr. Worthington," he said, "we've documented the situation. Your son and his wife will be contacted for further investigation." I nodded slowly. "They're leaving?" I asked. "Yes," he said. For now. For now." I understood what that meant. This wasn't over. Not completely. But the immediate danger had passed. "Your accounts are secured," he continued. "And we've advised the facility to cancel any intake procedures under your name." I glanced around the room again, at the place that had been prepared for me, then back at him. "Thank you," I said. He gave a small nod. "You did the right thing," a small nod. "You did the right thing," he said. Those words again. Everyone kept saying that. And maybe they were right. But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like survival. Officer Daniels left shortly after. "And D for the first time since we arrived," he said. Those words again. Everyone kept saying that. And maybe they were right. But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like survival. Officer Daniels left shortly after. And for the first time since we arrived, there was nothing left to do. No confrontation, no decisions, just quiet. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in the chair. "It's over," I said. Daniel shook his head gently. "No," he said. "This part is over." I looked at him. "What comes next?" He met my gaze. "You decide what your life looks like without them controlling it." That was a bigger problem, them controlling it. That was a bigger question than anything that had happened so far. Because it wasn't about reacting anymore. It was about choosing. And for the first time in a long time, that choice was entirely mine. We didn't stay at Sunridge much longer after that. There was nothing left to prove, nothing left to confront. The plan Ethan and Lindsay had built carefully, quietly, confidently had unraveled in a matter of hours. And what surprised me most wasn't how quickly it fell apart. It was how fragile it had always been. All it took was one person noticing, one person asking the right question, one moment of refusing to accept what didn't feel right. As Daniel and I stepped back outside, the night air felt different from before. Cooler, sharper, cleaner. Like something heavy had been lifted, not completely, but enough for me to breathe again. We walked slowly toward the car. Neither of us spoke at first. Because sometimes silence isn't empty. Sometimes it's where things finally start to settle. When we reached the car, Daniel leaned against the door for a moment instead of getting in. "You did something important tonight," he said. I looked at him. "I didn't do it alone," I replied. He gave a small, almost dismissive shake of his head. "I just pointed," he said. "You walked." That stayed with me, because he was right. At every step, I could have chosen differently. I could have ignored the signs. I could have gone quietly. I could have accepted what they had planned for me. But I didn't. And now, I had to figure out what came next. "Where do I go?" I asked. It was the simplest question, and the most complicated. Daniel opened the car door, then paused. "That depends," he said. "Do you still want to go where you were going before?" I thought about that. About the house. About the place I had called home. and the people who had tried to take it from me. No, I said slowly. Not like that. He nodded. Then we figure something else out. We got into the car, and as he started the engine, I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have a plan. No schedule, no expectations, no one waiting for me. And strangely, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like space. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Daniel asked. I hesitated. I don't know, I admitted. He nodded, already thinking. There's a small hotel not far from here, he said. Nothing fancy but quiet. Secure. That sounds fine, I said. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced back at the building one last time. Sunridge, a place I had never chosen, a future I had never agreed to, and now a path I had walked away from. The drive was shorter this time, or maybe it just felt that way. The tension that had filled the car earlier was gone, replaced by something quieter. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to it. When we arrived at the hotel, Daniel walked in with me. Not because I needed help checking in, but because he understood something deeper. Sometimes you don't leave someone alone right after everything changes. The front desk clerk greeted us with a tired but friendly smile. Checking in? She asked. Yes, I said. As she processed the reservation, I realized how strange this moment was. Just hours ago, I had been a man sitting on a bench with no identification, no belongings, and no clear direction. Now, I was standing at a counter making decisions again. Small ones, but mine. When she handed me the key card, I held it for a second longer than necessary. Because it represented something simple. Access, control, choice. Room 214, she said. Thank you, I replied. Daniel stepped back slightly, giving me space. You'll be all right? He asked. I looked at him, at the man who had stepped into my life without warning and changed everything. I will be, I said. He nodded. Good. We stood there for a moment, and I realized something I hadn't said yet. Daniel, I said. He looked at me. Thank you. He didn't smile, didn't brush it off, just gave a small, respectful nod. You do the same, he said. I thought about that, and maybe he was right. Get some rest, he added. Tomorrow things start to take shape. I nodded. Will I see you again? I asked. He considered that for a moment. Probably I thought about that, and maybe he was right. Get some rest, he added. Tomorrow things start to take shape. I nodded. Will I see you again? I asked. He considered that for a moment. Probably, he said. People like us, we tend to cross paths again. There was something reassuring in that. Not certain, but possible. And right now, that was enough. We shook hands. Firm. Steady. Then he turned and walked out. Just like that. No dramatic goodbye. No lingering moment. Just done. I watched him leave for a second before heading toward the elevator. Room 214. The hallway was quiet. Soft lighting. Muted carpet. Ordinary. Exactly what I needed. When I stepped inside the room, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment. Everything caught up at once. The airport. The betrayal. The confrontation. The realization. I exhaled slowly, letting it all settle. Then I walked over to the bed and sat down, For the first time all day, I was alone. But it didn't feel the same as before. Because earlier, alone had meant abandoned. Now alone meant free. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. No new messages, no missed calls. Ethan hadn't tried to reach me. Not yet. I stared at the screen for a moment, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, relief. But what I felt instead was clarity. Because I understood something now. Family isn't defined by who claims you. It's defined by who stands with you when it matters. And today, that hadn't been my son. I placed the phone on the nightstand and lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. Tomorrow would come. There would be decisions to make, steps to take, maybe even consequences for what had happened. But tonight, I allowed myself one simple truth. I had been left behind. And I had found my way forward anyway. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because the room was uncomfortable. It wasn't. The bed was soft, the air conditioning steady, the silence uninterrupted. But my mind refused to settle. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The airport bench, Ethan walking away, Lindsay taking the envelope, the way they didn't look back. And then, just as quickly, the other images would follow. Daniel stepping toward me, Officer Ramirez pulling up the footage. The moment everything shifted, it was like my mind couldn't decide which version of the day was real. The one where I was abandoned, or the one where I fought back. By the time the sun began to rise, I was already sitting up in bed, staring out the window. The sky was pale, just beginning to brighten. A new day. It sounded simple, but it didn't feel simple. Because this wasn't just another morning. This was the first morning of a life that no longer looked the way I thought it would. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. Still no messages. Still no missed calls. Ethan hadn't tried to contact me. Not after everything. Not after being confronted. Not even to explain. I stared at the screen for a moment longer than necessary. And then I did something I hadn't expected. I put the phone back down because I realized something important. Silence is also an answer. I got dressed slowly, taking my time. There was no rush, no schedule, no one waiting, and yet I didn't feel lost. I felt deliberate. When I stepped outside, the morning air was cooler than the night before. Quiet, almost peaceful. I stood there for a moment, letting it settle around me. Then I heard a familiar voice. Morning. I turned. Daniel, standing near his car, a cup of coffee in his hand, like he had been there for a while. I wasn't surprised. Not really. You've been here long? I asked. He shrugged slightly. Long enough. I nodded. That sounds like you, I said. He handed me the second coffee he had been holding. Figured you might need it. I took it. Thank you. We stood there for a moment, sipping in silence. Not awkward, not forced. Just that sounds like you, I said. He handed me the second coffee he had been holding. Figured you might need it. I took it. Thank you. We stood there for a moment, sipping in silence. Not awkward, not forced. Just present. How did you sleep? He asked. I didn't, I said honestly. He nodded. Yeah, that's about right. I glanced at him. You? I asked. Same, he replied. That almost made me smile. Almost. We leaned against the car facing the quiet street. What happens today? I asked. Daniel took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. Today, he said you take back control of E. He said you take back control of E, very thing they tried to take from you. I frowned slightly. Meaning we make it official, he said. Legal, financial, documented. I nodded. That made sense, because last night had been about stopping the damage. Today, very thing they tried to take from you. I frowned slightly. Meaning we make it official, he said. Legal, financial, documented. I nodded. That made sense, because last night had been about stopping the damage. Today was about repairing it. We start with your identity, he continued. Get you proper documentation again. And then I asked. Then we secure your assets completely. Not just freeze them, protect them long term. I exhaled slowly. And after that, Daniel looked at me. That's where it becomes your choice. There it was again. Choice. It kept coming back to that. Because for so long, I hadn't really been making them. Not consciously. I had been reacting, adjusting, accommodating, especially when it came to Ethan. But not anymore. Do you think he'll try again? I asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes. That surprised me. Even after last night. I said. He nodded. People who go that far don't usually stop after one failure. He said. They adjust. They look for another angle. I let that sink in, because it changed things. This wasn't over. Not completely. Then we don't give him another angle, I said. Daniel gave a small nod. Exactly. We finished our coffee and got into the car. This time, the drive felt different. Not tense. Not uncertain. Focused. Like we were moving towards something instead of reacting to it. Our first stop was a local legal office. Rebecca Lawson, the same attorney officer Ramirez had contacted the night before. When we walked in, she greeted us immediately. Mr. Worthington, she said, extending her hand. I've been expecting you. Her tone was professional, but not distant. Grounded, confident, the kind of presence you want when things matter. Please have a seat, she said. We sat across from her desk. She opened a file. Let's go over what we know, she said, and just like that, it began. Not the emotional part, not the personal part, the structural part, the part that would determine what happened next. You still retain full ownership of your home in Cleveland, she said. Nothing has been transferred. I nodded. That's good. Your accounts have been secured, she continued. Well, add additional layers of protection, and the documents he took? I asked. We can invalidate anything that hasn't been legally executed, she said. Without your signature, they have no authority. I felt something ease in my chest, not relief, but reassurance. They tried to move quickly, she added. That's common in these cases. I glanced at Daniel. He gave a slight nod. They almost succeeded, I said. Rebecca looked at me directly. But they didn't, she replied. That mattered, more than I expected. Now she continued. We need to decide how far you want to take this. I knew what she meant. Legal action, consequences, accountability. I leaned back slightly, thinking, not reacting, not emotional, just thinking. Because this decision wasn't about anger. It was about boundaries, and for the first time in my life, I understood the difference. I don't want revenge, I said slowly. Rebecca nodded. Understood, but I do want protection, I added. Then we build it. she said. Simple, clear, final. I looked at Daniel, then back at her. Let's do it, I said. And in that moment, I realized something. Yesterday, I had been the man left behind at an airport. Today, I was the man deciding what comes next. The next few days didn't feel dramatic. There were no raised voices, no confrontations, no sudden twists. And yet, they were some of the most important days of my life, because this was where everything was rebuilt. Piece by piece, choice by choice. Rebecca Lawson moved quickly, faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, she had filed official documentation confirming my sole ownership of the house in Cleveland, added legal restrictions preventing any unauthorized financial access, flagged any attempted use of my identity across multiple systems, begun formal documentation of what had happened with Ethan and Lindsay. It's not about punishment, she told me during one of our meetings. It's about protection. That word stayed with me, because for so long I had confused protection with control. I had protected Ethan by helping him, by trusting him, by stepping back when he made decisions. But real protection meant protecting myself too. On the third day, I finally spoke to Sophie. My granddaughter. She called me in the afternoon. Her voice was hesitant. Grandpa? She said softly. I closed my eyes for a moment when I heard it. Because out of everything that had happened, this was the one relationship I wasn't ready to lose. I'm here, sweetheart, I said. There was a pause. Then, I'm sorry, she said. Just that. Simple, honest. What are you sorry for? I asked gently. For everything she said. I heard them talking before you came. I didn't know what to do. I felt something shift inside me. Not pain, not anger, something else. Understanding. You don't have to carry that, I said. But I knew something wasn't right, she insisted. I didn't know how to stop it. You're not responsible for their choices, I said. Silence. Then her voice quieter this time. Are you okay? I looked out the window, at the world that suddenly felt both unfamiliar and completely mine again. I am now, I said. And for the first time since all of this began, that felt true. Ethan didn't call, not once. But a letter arrived on the 5th day, handwritten. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Because part of me already knew what it would say. And part of me didn't want to read it. But eventually, I did. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. Apologies, explanations, excuses. He said he felt overwhelmed, that things had gotten out of control, that Lindsay had pushed for certain decisions, that he didn't know how to stop it once it started. And at the end, I hope you can forgive me. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't respond. Not right away, because forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. And that was something I finally understood. A week later, I flew back to Cleveland. This time, everything was different. I had proper identification, control over my accounts, legal protection in place, and most importantly, clarity. When I stepped back into my house, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, just like I had before I left. But this time, I saw it differently. Not as something I might lose, but as something I had chosen to keep. Every corner still held the same memories. Eleanor's laughter, Ethan's childhood, the life I had built. But now, it also held something new. Proof that I could lose everything and still stand. A few weeks later, I made a decision. Not out of fear, not out of pressure, out of choice. I sold the house. Not because anyone forced me to, but because I was ready. Ready for something different. Something intentional. I moved into a smaller community just outside the city. Not a facility. Not a place chosen for me. A place I chose myself. It had walking paths, a small library, people my age who weren't waiting to be managed but living. Fully. Independently. And for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. Daniel and I stayed in touch. Not constantly, but consistently. Sometimes a call, sometimes a visit, sometimes just a message that said, "You doing all right?" And every time the answer was the same. Yes, because I was. I never stopped thinking about that day at the airport. Not because it haunted me, but because it changed me. It stripped away something I had believed my whole life. That family always protects you. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the person who protects you is a stranger. And sometimes it's yourself. Months later, I finally wrote back to Ethan. Not a long letter, not emotional, just honest. I told him I forgave him, but I couldn't trust him, not the way I used to. And that trust was something he would have to rebuild, without expecting me to meet him halfway. Because some distances can't be closed with words. I never went back to that airport, but I didn't need to, because I carried something from that place with me. Not the pain, not the betrayal, but the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped waiting and started choosing. And that made all the difference. It's strange how life doesn't announce its turning points. There's no music, no signal, no clear line between before and after. But if you look closely, you can always find the moment where everything changed. For me, it wasn't the confrontation at Sunridge. It wasn't the legal meetings. It wasn't even the letter from Ethan. It was something quieter, simpler. It was the moment I stopped waiting. Months passed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but steadily. The kind of time that doesn't rush, but still changes everything. My new home settled around me slowly. At first, it felt unfamiliar. Different routines, different faces, different rhythms. But over time, it became something else. Not just a place I lived, a place I chose. Every morning, I walked the same path around the community, past the small lake, through the rows of oak trees, past people who nodded, smiled, sometimes stopped to talk. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that made all the difference. I made friends, not instantly, not easily, but honestly. There was Harold, a retired teacher who still carried himself like he was about to walk into a classroom. And Margaret, who had more stories than anyone I'd ever met and the kind of laughter that made you forget your own worries. They didn't know my story, not all of it, and I didn't feel the need to tell them, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by what I chose next. Sophie visited me one afternoon. That was the day everything shifted again. She stood at the door hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be there. "Hi, Grandpa," she said softly. I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because something real had survived. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied. She stepped inside slowly, looking around. "It's nice," she said. "I like it," I told her. She nodded, then sat down across from me. There was a long silence. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was careful. "I don't talk to them much anymore," she said finally. I didn't ask who. I knew. "That's your decision," I said. She looked at me. "I didn't like what they did," she added. I studied her face. The same eyes she had as a child. the same honesty. "You don't have to choose sides," I said gently. "I already did," she replied. That caught me off guard. Why, I asked. Her answer was simple. "Because you didn't leave me," she said. And just like that, everything made sense again. Ethan tried to reach out again. More than once. Calls, messages, another letter. Each one a little more urgent than the last. But I didn't rush to respond. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because I finally understood something I hadn't before. Time doesn't fix things. Change does. And I needed to see that change, not hear about it. One afternoon, I sat on a bench near the lake. The same kind of bench I had sat on months ago. But everything was different. Because I was different. I watched the water move slowly, listened to the quiet conversations around me, felt the sun on my face. And I realized something. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology, not for reconciliation, not for someone else to decide my future. I had already moved forward. Eventually, I did meet Ethan again. Not by accident, not unexpectedly. We arranged it. Public place, neutral ground, a small cafe halfway between where we both lived. When he walked in, I saw it immediately. He looked smaller, not physically, but in a way I couldn't quite explain. Less certain, less in control. He sat across from me, didn't speak right away, just looked at me. "I didn't think you'd come," he said finally. "I wasn't sure I would," I replied. That was the truth. He nodded. "I messed up," he said. I didn't respond, because that wasn't enough. "I thought I was helping," he continued. "You weren't," I said calmly. He looked down. "I know that now." Silence. Then, "Can we fix this?" he asked. That question. Simple, heavy, loaded with everything that had happened. I took a breath, then answered honestly. "I don't know," I said. He looked up, hopeful, uncertain. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," I paused, choosing my words carefully, "that fixing something like this takes time." He nodded slowly. "I'm willing to try," he said. I studied him. Not the boy I raised, not the man who left me at the airport, but the person sitting in front of me now, trying to understand where he stood. "That's a start," I said, and for the first time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a possibility, not guaranteed, not certain, but real. As I walked away from that cafe, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel closure, but I felt something better. I felt steady. Because I knew something I hadn't known before. No matter what happened next, I would be all right. Not because someone else would take care of me, not because things would magically work out, but because I had already faced the worst version of being alone and survived it. That day at the airport, I thought my life had fallen apart, but it hadn't. It had changed direction. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. Not comfort, not certainty, but a moment that forces you to see clearly, to choose differently, to stand for yourself, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. You don't always get to choose what people do to you, but you always get to choose what you do next. And that choice can change everything. If you've ever felt left behind, overlooked, or betrayed by the people you trusted most, I want to hear your story. Where are you watching from today, and what time is it where you are right now? Sometimes sharing even a small part of your experience can help someone else feel less alone. And if this story meant something to you, you can stay with me for more. Like it because there's always another story worth telling. Sometimes the most painful moments in life are not the ones where everything ends, but the ones where everything becomes clear. Being abandoned, betrayed, or forgotten by the people we trust most can break something deep inside us. It makes us question our worth, our judgment, even our entire past. But here's the truth. Most people don't realize right away. Those moments are not the end of your story. They are the moment your story finally becomes yours. Because when everything is stripped away, expectations, roles, relationships, you are left with one powerful choice. You can choose to stay broken, or you can choose to rebuild. You can choose to keep chasing people who hurt you, or you can choose to stand still and let them earn their way back into your life. And most importantly, you can choose to respect yourself in ways you never did before. Strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like walking away quietly. Sometimes it looks like saying no when you used to say yes. And sometimes it looks like starting over on your own terms at your own pace. What happened to you does not define you. What you choose next does. If this story touched you in any way, I'd really love to hear from you. Have you ever gone through a moment that changed how you see your family or yourself? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. And if you believe in stories that remind us we're not alone, consider subscribing so we can keep walking through these journeys together.